Hi there. My name is Zvika Krieger, and I am the spiritual leader at Chochmat Halev in Berkeley, California. And I'm so honored to be here with such an amazing group of folks and to lead this session today, which is called The Sanctuary Within. And I'm going to be talking about the concept of Jewish mindfulness, which is something that has become very popular lately. A lot of people have been talking about Jewish meditation and using meditation to calm the senses, calm the nervous system, find a sense of peace and grounding amidst all the chaos and all the digital distraction that is surrounding us today. And while a lot of the meditation that we see in current society around us today comes from more of a Buddhist or Eastern tradition, there's actually a very deep history of contemplative practices within Judaism, and particularly within Jewish mysticism. And so today, what we're going to talk about is how to build your Jewish mindfulness or Jewish meditation practice. And we're going to look to this week's Torah portion for a number of clues or tips and tools for how we can build a mindfulness practice. And so in this week's Torah portion, we learn about the sanctuary that God commands the Israelites to build in the desert. It's called the Mishkan, or the dwelling place. And it seems like a perfect example or a perfect vehicle to explore this idea of mindfulness, because the idea of a sanctuary is, I think, something that all of us can relate to amidst all the things that are calling our attention, all of the busyness, everything on our to-do list that we're constantly trying to get through every day, that we probably are all can relate to this idea of needing a sanctuary. And so while it may be easy to dismiss this idea of an elaborate tent in the desert thousands of years ago, it might be easy to dismiss that as irrelevant to us in the modern world. The question that we're going to explore today is, how can we create a sanctuary for ourselves? How can we connect with the divine as part of a Jewish meditation or Jewish mindfulness practice? And in order to learn about that, or to draw lessons about that from this week's Torah portion, I actually just want to hone in on one verse in particular. And this verse is actually the cornerstone of a lot of the key teachings of Jewish mysticism, of Kabbalah and Chassidut. This verse undergirds so many of the foundational teachings in the Jewish mystical tradition. And so it's perhaps not a coincidence that this is the Torah portion that we are reading this week. And so the verse goes like this. It says, Asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham, which is often translated as make for me a sanctuary and I will dwell within it. And so, or make for me a holy place and I will dwell within it. But there's actually a interesting grammatical challenge in this verse that opens up an entire world of mystical interpretation. The grammatical challenge is that the verse is actually translated as they shall make for me a holy place and I will dwell within them. And so even though it says mikdash, the holy place, is singular, then it says, and I, the divine, will dwell in them, which is plural. So what is that? Why is that? What is the deeper spiritual significance of this? And so what the Jewish mystics teach us when they interpret this verse is that God knew that we wouldn't always have this temple, this sanctuary, whether it was the traveling tent of meeting, Mishkan in the desert, or the Beit HaMikdash, the holy temple in Jerusalem, that we might be one day in exile, Or we might come across a time where this idea of having a physical sanctuary or a temple might not resonate with us. Like maybe for many of you today, this concept of having a physical temple where you go and pray and worship does not resonate for you. Or maybe it was, the divine was predicting a time when we would be quarantined in our houses and that we actually couldn't go to a physical tent of meeting or gathering in place. And so what the mystics, the way they translate this verse is that you are the sanctuary. That what the divine is saying is Vashachanti Pitocham, that I will dwell in you. I will reside in you. And so that's actually an incredibly radical and powerful explanation of why we switch from the singular to the plural, is that we make a holy place, and the divine will dwell in all of us. And this feels particularly powerful at the time of the world that we're living in today, when sometimes it feels like everything around us is crumbling, when the institutions that we've relied on for so many years are disappearing or losing their way or losing our ability to believe in them, when we don't know who to trust. And the invitation of this verse is to turn inward. That we are the Mishkan, we are the Mikdash, we are the sanctuary. And so I invite you to close your eyes for a moment and take a deep breath. I invite you to feel your feet on the ground, get grounded, get present, and let that sink in for a moment. Feel that teaching. How does it feel in your body to know that the divine spirit resides in you? That you are the mikdash, that you are the sanctuary that the divine spirit resides in. But it's important to point out that the verse says asuli mikdash. It doesn't say that we are automatically a sanctuary, that we actually have to make ourselves into a sanctuary. The divine says, make me a sanctuary, and then I will dwell within you. So the question is, how do we make ourselves a mikdash? How do we make ourselves a sanctuary for the divine spirit? And so I'm going to offer a few ideas from a number of different mystic teachers and scholars over the generations for how we can interpret some sections from this Torah portion around this verse that may perhaps give us some tips on how we can turn ourselves into a sanctuary, and not just be a sanctuary for the divine, but to be a sanctuary for ourselves, where we can dwell in that inner sanctuary and create that sense of inner peace for ourselves. And so over the course of this workshop, I'm going to give a couple of extended opportunities for meditation. And so I'm going to invite you, and I'll give instruction, but I want you to get comfortable that I'm going to share some teachings, but we're actually going to have some time to sit in silence and contemplate those teachings. And so get comfortable in your chair, maybe close the door, turn off the ringer on your cell phone so that you can really get comfortable and be able to connect with the mystical teachings around this verse and really breathe into and embody this idea of becoming a sanctuary. So let's just take a deep breath together before we embark on this journey of becoming a sanctuary, of Asuli Mikdash. Let's take a deep breath in, deep breath out. Here we go. So I'm gonna give 3 teachings, and after each teaching, we're gonna have an opportunity to meditate and contemplate and embody these mystical insights. And so the first teaching on this concept of Asuli Mikdash comes from Reb Shlomo of Lutsk, who is known as the Dibrat Shlomo for his commentary on the Torah. And he was the right-hand man of the Maggid of Mezrich, who is one of the successors to the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism. And so Reb Shlomo of Lutsk was right there in the heart of it at the birth of this 19th century, 18th century mystical revival in Eastern Europe known as Hasidism, which at its core was to take some of the more esoteric teachings of Kabbalah and the Zohar and translate them into a way that people could understand them more deeply. And so Reb Shlomo of Lutsk, one of the early teachers of Hasidism, and in his commentary on this verse in this week's Parsha, he says, okay, this week's Parsha this week's Torah portion is dedicated to the creation of the Mishkan. And the Mishkan is, we get all of these instructions for how to build this elaborate tent of gathering, this sanctuary in the desert. We have all of these ornate vessels and tapestries and fabrics and gold and silver and wood and all of this pomp and circumstance around the design and the construction of it. But what the Dibrat Shlomo says is that the reality is that the divine spirit does not need any of that. It doesn't need any of that pomp and circumstance, all of this material finery. All the divine needs is you. That's where the divine dwells, is inside of you. And Reb Shlomo of Lutsk, he quotes the Jerusalem Talmud, the Talmud Yerushalmi, in the tractate of Brachot, Masechet Brachot. And in that tractate, it considers all the ways that we can relate to the divine, all the rituals and the praise and the honorifics. It goes through this long list of different ways that we can relate to the divine. And at the end comes to a single conclusion, says, Hashtika ole hakol. And what that translates as is silence is the best of all. If the divine resides within us, then the best way to connect with the divine is simply to shut up and listen. That the way to turn ourselves into a sanctuary is to quiet all the noise around us, the distractions, and that's both the physical noise of, all of the things, the buzzes and the buzzing and the notifications that are vying for our attention, but also to quiet the inner critics and the outer critics, the people in our lives who may be giving us messages that we're not worthy, that we're not good enough, that we're not smart enough, that we're not accomplished enough, and can reside in us, is quiet. Hashtika ole hakol. And so as our first exercise, we're just going to breathe into this quiet and see if we can quiet our mind. And so there's physical quiet. And so if you're in a place where there's maybe music playing in the background, or if, maybe there's a door or window that you can close to bring yourself some quiet, I invite you to go ahead and do that right now. But we're going to do some exercises where we can quiet the inner voice. Our inner thought process that keeps us distracted and keeps us from being present in the moment. Because oftentimes that inner voice is either thinking about the past, the things that have happened to us, the people that have caused us pain, maybe good memories, bad memories, and so we have some sense of sadness or feeling about things that have happened in the past. Or we're thinking about the future, and that tends to be anxiety, worrying about things that are happening in the future. We're planning, we're constantly thinking about our to-do list, everything that we need to accomplish. There's a sense that we have to do, we have to get things done in the future in order to be worthy, in order to be valuable. And what mindfulness invites us, and what Reb Shlomo of Lutsk invites us, is to say, can we just be present in the moment? Can we quiet the voices that are trying to either make us ruminate or focus on the past, or the voices that get us anxious and that we're constantly planning for the future? So I'm going to invite you to get comfortable. If you're seated in a chair, I invite you to sit up straight in your chair and feel your back against the back of your chair. And then feel your body, your sit bones, your bottom on the seat, and your feet on the ground. And you can take your hands and put them on your lap. I invite you to close your eyes. And we're just going to take a couple deep breaths together. Breathe in. Breathe out. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. Let's try for a few minutes just to sit in silence. Just notice what happens as you sit in silence. Perhaps as you're sitting in silence, your mind starts to wander. Perhaps you start thinking about something that happened to you today, or something that you need to do to get done later today. And I invite you to bring your attention back to the present moment. One way that you can do that is by anchoring to your breath, something that can hold your attention so that you're not drifting off into the thinking mind, but that you can stay present in the experience of what's happening right here, right now. And so stay focused on your breath. I invite you to, you don't need to force your breath in any way. You don't have to take long, deep breaths if you don't want to, if that doesn't feel natural. Just notice the subtle in-breath, out-breath. We say in the Jewish tradition that when we wake up in the morning, our first prayer is Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam shehachazarta bi nishmati. And so we give thanks to the divine for returning our souls. That's the traditional translation. But the word for soul, neshama, is the same word in Hebrew for breath, which is neshima. And so I like to say thank you to the divine for giving us this gift of the breath, that no matter what's happening in our lives, if we're being distracted and being pulled out of the present moment, then we can always return to our breath. And so shehachazarta bi neshimati, so that the divine returns us to our breath. And so let's take a minute or two of sitting in quiet and returning, of staying anchored to our breath. And if we find ourselves drifting, just come back to your breath. The act of mindfulness is not, or the practice of mindfulness is not about necessarily being present in every moment, but it's about realizing when we're not present and coming back. The return to presence is the act of mindfulness. And so we quiet the chatter of the mind, ashtika oleh hakol, by returning to our breath and staying anchored in the present moment. notice if your thoughts are drifting away from the present moment. You find yourself thinking about something that has happened or something that needs to happen in the future. Bring your attention back to your breath, to the present moment, what's happening right here, what's unfolding right now. We call in the wisdom of Reb Shlomo of Lutsk, who reminds us that the way we make ourselves a sanctuary of the divine, for the divine, is through shtika, through quieting the mind, so that we can actually hear what the divine has to say to us. So as we sit in silence, I invite you to connect to that inner voice of the divine that's dwelling within you. Just notice what it might be trying to say to you. You find yourself being distracted by thoughts. Return to your breath. Shechazarta bi nishimati. Just notice the air coming in, the air coming out. So from this place of inner quiet, we move to our second teaching about Asuli Mikdash. Rabbi Yehuda Aryeh Leib Alter, the 19th century Rebbe of Ger Hasidim, most people know him as the Sfas Emes, which is the name of his most popular book. He really takes this reading one step further. He says that this word betocham, that the divine will dwell in them, it's not some abstract, ethereal notion of dwelling in our soul. It's not this conceptual idea of us being a sanctuary for the divine, but rather it's actually quite literal, that the divine lives in our bodies, bitocham, inside of our physical, corporeal bodies. And as the Sfas Emes would say, like in our kishkas, that's where the divine dwells. And I noticed that in reading this week's Parsha, Torah portion, that the word Mishkan, dwelling place, is used both to describe the entire tabernacle, the entire tent of meeting, as well as the ornate tapestries that cover it. So the same word is both the entire building and the covering of the building. So the object and its coverings are one and the same, that our exterior is actually part of who we are. So Asuli Mikdash is actually an invitation to embrace our bodies. And I know that's not easy for everyone. Some people, and I would definitely include myself in this, have very complicated relationships with our bodies. You know, some of us have struggled with our weight or body dysmorphia. Some of us have felt like our sex at birth doesn't match our gender expression or experience. Some of us, some of our bodies, some of us may have engaged in self-mutilation, or maybe we've been the victims of physical or sexual abuse. And some of our bodies are starting to, show the wear and tear of aging, and maybe some of our bodies can't keep up with our minds and with our hearts. Some of us are feeling the effects of COVID right now, or maybe we're in the throes of infection or some long COVID effects, or maybe you start to feel anxiety rise every time you cough or have a headache. For many of us, our bodies can feel more like prisons than sanctuaries. But this week's Torah portion comes to teach us that all these complicated feelings about our bodies are what makes it such a perfect dwelling place for the divine. That the divine chooses to live specifically amidst all that fragility, that right in the middle of that humanness, that the complexity of our bodies is actually where the divine dwells, according to the Sfas Emes. That our bodies are perfect in their imperfection. And I want to quote the words of my beloved Chavruta study partner, Reb Jericho Vincent, who is the spiritual leader of Temple of the Stranger in Brooklyn, who writes, you imperfect human body, you who are conflicted and ashamed by these conflicted feelings about your body, you, this frail and compromised flesh, V'shachanti betochem, God dwells within you. And so the second invitation, if we take this teaching from the Sfas Emes, is that if we want to be a sanctuary, if we want to be a mikdash for the divine, then we have to embrace and really connect to our bodies. And for a lot of us, I'd say particularly for Jews, we have a challenge that we're always so in our brains, that we're always thinking and analyzing and assessing and pulling apart and hewing over, And the invitation from this week's Parsha, according to the Sfas Emes, is that we have to be embodied, that we have to experience our physical bodies. Some people say that, they feel dead from the neck down, that everything happens up here, and that from the neck down they don't feel anything. And so we need to move into our bodies. And so I'm going to invite you for this second step of becoming a mikdash, so that the divine can dwell in us. I'm going to invite you to close your eyes once again. And this time we're going to connect with our bodies. And we're going to see, what does it feel like to really feel our bodies? So we're going to do a bit of a body scan. And this really is actually a continuation of that first meditation, because feeling your body is a way of being present in the moment. And so when you notice the temperature in the room, or you notice the feeling of your body against your chair, that's actually immediate. That's something that's happening in the moment. And that if you notice something that's happening right now, a sensation, you're inherently not thinking about the past or the future, but you're thinking about the present. And so I invite you once again to close your eyes and get comfortable. And I invite you to put your feet on the ground, feel your 2 feet on the ground, and you can put your hands in your lap and take a deep breath together. Breathe out. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. Notice, keep breathing in and out. Notice how it feels when your lungs fill with air. Notice how it feels when the breath comes in through your throat, travels down into your chest. Notice the temperature of the air and how that might differ from the temperature of your body. Notice how your lungs might feel when they're full of air. And you may want to, as you breathe in, feel your chest expand, feel your lungs get bigger, feel your lungs filling your chest with that deep breath. Notice how it feels when the breath pushes against the lungs, and when the lungs push against your rib cage. And then release. Notice how that feels when your lungs retract back to their resting state. Notice how the air feels traveling back up your throat and out your mouth. Notice how the air feels on your teeth and on your tongue, on your lips. Notice how the air maybe has a different texture than it did when it came down. It's carrying out different things than it brought in. So as we take the Sfas Emes's invitation to really feel the Divine Spirit b'tocham, to connect with our bodies, we'll do a body scan to really notice what are we feeling right here, right now, in the present moment. What are the sensations? So with your eyes closed, or you can just soften your gaze, notice how your feet feel on the ground. You can rub your feet a little bit. If you're wearing shoes, you can curl your toes inside your shoes and maybe put a little pressure down into the ground, and notice how your feet are feeling right now. What sensations are you experiencing in your feet? Slowly bring your awareness from your feet up your legs. Notice how you're feeling in your calves, in your knees. If there's any aches, is there any tingling, any tightness or soreness? Continue bringing your awareness up your legs to your thighs, your quads, your glutes, your hamstrings, that top meaty part of your legs. Feel your seat, where your butt is touching the chair, or if you're sitting on the floor. Notice the pressure. How does that feel? Notice the small of your back up against your chair. Does that make you comfortable? Are you feeling any pain or dis-ease? No need to judge. No need to change. Just notice. Notice what you're feeling. Bring your awareness up to your stomach and your chest. Notice what's roiling around in there. What are you feeling? What are the sensations? Bring your feeling up to your chest, to your shoulders. We carry a lot of stress and tension in our shoulders and upper back. Maybe you want to move your shoulders a little bit backwards or forwards, and just notice what may be coming up for you. What might you be feeling? What are the sensations? Again, no need to judge them, no need to make any stories about why you're feeling those sensations and whether you should or shouldn't be feeling those sensations, but just notice what you're feeling. Bring your awareness down your arms, your biceps, your elbows, your wrists and forearms, down to your hands and fingers. What are you feeling? What is the sensation? Are you in pain? Are you comfortable? Are you hot? Are you cold? Is there any tingling? Is there any tightness or looseness? Is there anything your body wants to do? Just notice. Notice the impulses. And now bring your awareness back to your neck, up to your face. Notice how your face might be feeling, your eyes, your nose, the inside of your mouth. bring your awareness to your top of your head, your forehead, your crown. What does it feel like? What are you feeling in this moment? And as we close this body scan, just scan up and down your body from your head, down to your midsection, down your legs to your feet, and then back up to your head. And just notice what stands out for you. What are you feeling? Notice that in all that time that you were spending looking at your, connecting with your body, that you were actually being present in the moment. And by and large, you were probably not thinking about your to-do list. And maybe it popped up from time to time, but returning to the sensations in your body are a good way to stay present in the moment so that we can be this sanctuary, this mikdash for the divine. So whenever you want to connect to the divine spirit, you can follow the invitation of the Sfas Emes to really connect with Bitocham, with our physical embodied selves. Let's take a deep breath to anchor that practice. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. And so the third teaching, the third tool that I'd like to offer today is when we look at the broader context of where we see this Asuli Mikdash verse. It says, Kichol asher ani mar'eh otcha et tavnit hamishkan ve'et tavnit kol kelav ken ta'asu. And that's traditionally translated as, you shall follow the instructions I'm about to show you for building the Mishkan, the dwelling place, and all the vessels. But there's an interesting quirk with the word you in I will show you. The Torah uses the word otcha or otach instead of lecha, which would make more grammatical sense there, in that the instructions that I'm going to show you. And my dear teacher and leading scholar in Kabbalah and mysticism, Rabbi Art Green, he explains this by translating the verse as the divine saying, what I'm showing you is you. The word for show in this verse is mar'eh. Mar'eh otcha, or mar'eh otach, which is actually like the word in Hebrew for mirror, which is mar'ah. Mar'eh and mar'ah share the same root. So according to Rabbi Art Green, what he teaches is that I, the divine spirit, will be a mirror for you. That's actually what this verse is saying. Ani mar'eh otcha. I am a mirror for you. And so what I take away from this is sometimes we're really hard on ourselves. We focus in on all of our weaknesses, the ways that we're not hitting the mark, the way that we're not meeting others' expectations, and often just the way that we're not meeting our own expectations. I know that, for example, that when my old boss in one of my old jobs used to give me my annual performance evaluation, she started by giving me all the positive feedback on one day, and then the next day, and the constructive feedback the next day, because she realized that when she gave me the positive feedback and the negative feedback or the constructive feedback on the same day, that basically I filtered out all of the good stuff and I hyper-focused on all of the bad stuff. And so I think that's like a very human instinct that we only focus on the bad things, and that we don't ever focus on all the good things, that like all the ways that we are good in life. And so so basically, according to Rabbi Art Green's interpretation of this book, of this verse, what God is essentially saying is, hey, you've got to be pretty damn awesome if you are my dwelling place. So essentially, the divine is holding up a mirror for us for all the ways in which we are uniquely positioned to be a sanctuary for the divine. Another teaching on this topic, Rabbi Elimelech of Lezhensk, who's another student of the Maggid of Mezrich, and he's known for his book, the Noam Elimelech. He comments on the second verse of our Parsha, our Torah portion, in which every person is instructed to bring a contribution to the building of the Mishkan, the dwelling place, the tent of meeting. And what it says in that verse is Vatikachna li truma. And Rabbi Elimelech says, don't translate that as every person shall bring me a contribution, but rather you shall find me in your contribution. So Vatikachna li truma, that your unique gift is exactly what the divine is looking for. That's where you can find the divine. And so I invite you for our third exercise together to close your eyes and to really take in this invitation of the mar'eh, or of the ani mar'eh otcha, or otach, that I am the mirror for you. That if the divine really intended us to be the mikdash, to be the sanctuary or the dwelling place, then we have to be pretty remarkable in order for the divine to choose us. And so I invite you to close your eyes for a moment and think about all the ways in which you are the perfect sanctuary, the perfect dwelling place for the divine. All the things that you bring that make you you, that make you the perfect dwelling place for the divine. And look into that mirror. The divine, as taught by the mystics, the Jewish mystics, the divine is the mirror. That if we are created B'Tselem Elohim, that if we are created in the image of the divine, then the way that we can understand the divine and see the divine is by looking in the mirror. So I invite you to close your eyes, and let's take a deep breath to ground into that. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. Let's do one more. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. I invite you to really take in that message, that you are uniquely suited to being a resting place, a dwelling place for the divine. The divine is choosing you. I know that sometimes we can be modest or we beat ourselves up, but this is just really an invitation to focus on all the things about us that are amazing, that are remarkable. Because if those things weren't there, then the divine would not be choosing us as a dwelling place. So look in that divine mirror, that mar'ah, and consider, what is it that's remarkable about you that makes you a beautiful dwelling place for the divine? If you find yourself getting distracted, maybe it's uncomfortable for you to dwell on the parts of you that are amazing and beautiful and special, come back to your breath Deep breath in, deep breath out. And just know that you are a mirror for the divine. And push yourself to really embrace and connect to those remarkable parts of yourself, your inner beauty, because that's a key practice in Asuli Mikdash, in making yourself into a sanctuary. Just another minute or two. To close off this third practice, let's take a deep breath in, deep breath out. Just imagine yourself looking in a mirror that's being held up to you, for you, by the divine, and smile. Smile at yourself, knowing that you are the perfect dwelling place for the divine, perfect in all your imperfections. And as a final thought on this verse, Asuli Mikdash, to close our practice together, in the verse that I mentioned above, it says, Ki chol asher ani mar'a otach or etcha ken ta'asena. All that I will show you, thus you should do. So these are the instructions of the divine on how to build, from the divine on how to build the sanctuary. And the you in the first part of the verse is singular. As we said, God will be a mirror so we can see ourselves as individuals. But then the you in the second half of the verse becomes plural, which I'm interpreting as a teaching that we can only build this sanctuary in the plural, in community. If the way to be a dwelling place for the divine is to know ourselves, it's really hard to do that in isolation. We need others who can be a mar'ah for us, a mirror, those who can reflect back to us those parts of ourselves that we can't see. Maybe it's parts of ourselves that we're blind to out of self-doubt or humility, or maybe there's wounding from our childhood that prevents us from seeing some of that beauty. So we need others, the plural you, to help us be that mirror, to be that mirror for us. And the word mishkan has the same root as the word shchuna, which in modern Hebrew means community. It also has the same root as shechina, which means the feminine attribute of the divine. And I feel like especially coming out of COVID, when we've been so isolated from others, it's been easy for me to get into my head about all the ways that I'm falling short, to fall victim to the old stories that play on loop in my head. And, I realize that, seeing myself refracted through the loving eyes of my family, my friends, my community, that's really helpful for me to connect with my own worth. And it's an aspect of community that I took for granted and that I've really been missing these past few years when we were really distanced and isolated from each other. And as we're now being more together in community, it's something that I really cherish. And the divine is reminding us in this week's Parsha that connecting with the loving embrace of community is a big part of what prepares us to be a sanctuary. And it's not just about that embrace of community, but we really need our communities to complement us. Because it says, as it says in the beginning of this week's Torah portion, Parsha, that each person was commanded to contribute to the Mishkan, to the tent of meeting, Asher Yidvena Liba, that as inspired by their heart. And we learn that this sanctuary we're supposed to build is not something that we can do alone, but it's the sum of all the unique stew of complexity that resides in each of our hearts that we can only experience in community. So for all the ways that we can't go it alone, that we need to rely on others for help, the divine says, yes, I will reside in you, and in you, and in you. And only by contributing our uniqueness can we actually create a communal sanctuary for the divine. And so in these crazy times, I think we're all looking for some sense of sanctuary. And this week's Torah portion gives us some wisdom for how we can find that sanctuary, how we can make ourselves into a sanctuary. And so my blessing to each of you, to each of us, is that first of all, that we can find some quiet. Hashtika ole hakol, that we can tune out the noise, the distractions, and connect to our inner wisdom. My second blessing is that may we be blessed to look into God's mirror, mar'ah, and see reflected back to us the beauty and the complexity the divine sees in us. And third is that may we be blessed to be at home in our bodies, in all their complexity, and that the divine makes its home in them, in our physical bodies. And lastly, may we all be blessed to feel the love of community holding us as we travel through this wilderness, this midbar, together. And so in our last few moments together, let's once again, I invite you to close your eyes, feel your feet on the ground, and we'll take some last few breaths together as we've created this sanctuary for the divine to dwell within us, b'tocham. Take a deep breath in, deep breath out. Deep breath in, deep breath out. And just know that when life gets tough, when you're confronting challenges or feeling stressed out or lost or afraid or lonely, just know that you can return to this inner sanctuary, to this mikdash, and have that deep, direct connection and experience to the divine that dwells within each of us. Shabbat Shalom to all of you, and blessings to you on your journey.